You're listening to episode 14 of StoryCast 21. I'm Jane Secker. In March 2003, less than 2 years after the 9/11 attacks, the US-led military coalition set about toppling the then Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein. Long seen as a destabilising influence in the Middle East, Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait in 1990 brought about the first Gulf War with a US-led coalition. This time, he stood accused of amassing weapons of mass destruction and having ties with the Islamic terror group al-Qaeda. Among those involved in the ground invasion was an idealistic US Marine who would soon find himself at the centre of one of this century's most iconic moments. This is taking down Saddam.
Where you were earlier at the Palestine Hotel.
I can't hear.
Can you hear me, David? Can you tell us the name of the roundabout?
Yes, I can hear you, but...
My name is David Chater.
I was just asking you to tell us the name of the roundabout where you are.
On the 9th of April 2003, I was the Sky correspondent embedded in Baghdad.
This is the roundabout. Let me just show you around a bit. If the camera turns...
The war had been going on for something like 21 days when the coalition forces crossed the borders into Iraq, coming from both the north and the south.
The front line is squeezing in around us, and so is the sense of danger.
The war came about because both Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister, and George Bush, the American president at the time, had decided that Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Iraq, had built up an arsenal of weapons of mass destruction.
He is, without any question, still trying to develop that chemical, biological, potentially nuclear capability, and to allow him to do so without any let or hindrance, just to say we can carry on and do it, I think would be irresponsible. Look, I would never support
He came to power in 1979. It was a destabilising influence, the Iraqi dictator, in the central part of the Middle East. There was no real indication that there were large stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction, but I think the momentum of the military build-up was such that the attempt to oust Saddam Hussein was not going to be prevented in any way.
This is the hotel that was hit by the tank shell. If you carry on up this way and follow me.
We'd seen the A-10 tank busters, an extraordinary plane that growls, that comes in and scatters machine gun shots. That's how I knew that we could expect the Marines at any moment.
My name is Miles Hill from Oklahoma, a small town called Pauls Valley. I served with the United States Marine Corps as an infantry machine gunner. I was riding on the back of an armored troop transport. There were 13 of us packed inside this thing, pushing from the border of Kuwait, Iraq to Baghdad. I felt called to join the military. I had great-grandparents who had fought in World War II, a great-grandparent that had fought in Korea, and there was a lineage of military history. There was nothing that I could see would be a greater honor to myself than joining that organization and participating with such a historic unit. As a 19-year-old, I wish I could tell you that I had a better understanding of the geopolitical structure. But what I knew then was a dictator who had oppressed his people for more than 3 decades through violent oppression. Our orders were very general, and they were to push forward into the city against all resistance and secure the entire city. A few of us exchanged letters to our families that we gave to our friends. In case we were to die that day, our responsibility was to send those letters off as a final final letter. They had prepped us and told us this would be the bloodiest urban battle of Marine Corps history, and they were trying to get us ready for what they expected to be extremely heavy resistance upon entering the city. So death was something on everyone's mind.
David, we're just trying to work out the geography, exactly where you are. You say you've moved position from where you were earlier at the Palestine Hotel.
I was asked if I wanted to, drop my pen and head out of the country. I said no.
Yeah, you're coming and going, yes.
But most of the other colleagues I've been working with in Sky took up the offer, and so essentially I was there very much on my own.
In this mosque is where we saw some Fedayeen taking up position with Kalashnikovs and rocket-propelled grenades.
On April the 9th, the first thing we all noticed was there was nobody there, absolutely gone. Every single minder was no longer with us. And it was exhilarating, at the same time very frightening.
Just down there, past the statue of President Saddam Hussein, is where the Marines, with any luck, are pushing forward towards us. But that's all I know. I can only tell you.
The Amtraks went as fast as they could go. We were moving at a really quick speed. I was sitting on the top with my machine gun. It was kind of cool out, so the heat from the engine was bubbling up through the port we were standing out of. We're super high alert, your heart was pumping. Then as we began to enter into, actually cross the threshold from the uncivilized part of Baghdad into the structural part of Baghdad, there were skirmishes along the way.
We were standing there looking out with our equipment, wondering which way they'd come in, which direction. And then across the roundabout, suddenly you started hearing the tanks. And then a whole line swept in to the roundabout.
There's the statue of President Saddam Hussein, and there the American troops rolling in past it. That is a real...
Within maybe 20, 30 minutes of just pushing hard through the city, all of a sudden we were there, looking at the Tower of Saddam.
Children beginning to move into the streets along with the journalists. The residents don't quite know what to think yet. They haven't started coming out. But those tanks now parked in the road.
The reporters started coming out of the Baghdad Hotel, and the civilian populace just swarmed in. The square became packed. It was just a throng of people. Nobody really knew what to expect. And then as it began to shift through excitement, the reporters, and Sky News in particular, began to speak with different people on the interviews.
What's your name, mate?
Miguel Jimenez.
Good to see you.
And so we were told to stay on top and to watch for snipers on balconies, rooftops, windows, and to watch for any people within the crowd who weren't behaving or acting sort of suspicious in the context of the behavior of the other people.
You see a tank's taken up position at the very corner of the bank. The troops are deploying to the side. Keep coming with me.
They had their guns at the ready, they had their weapons and ammunition. They were still looking around, expecting at any moment to be fired upon.
But there are a few rounds still going off. We have to be careful. But as you can see, the Marines taking up tactical position here on the eastern bank of the Tigris.
They were young, they were obviously been through a hell of an experience just to get to where they were on the square.
What's your name? You're going out to America now as well.
My name's Sergeant Timothy Funk, United States Marine Corps.
Bloody good to see you.
But there was one guy
So let's join this
who
Marine.
I was talking to, and he was kneeling down and establishing a firing position.
You're live on Sky News right now. How's it been coming in?
It's been pretty good coming in here, as a matter of fact. Is this it?
Yeah, this is just about it. You've got nothing else to really take.
Well, let's hope so. But hopefully they
He couldn't believe that it actually reached the center of Baghdad. Was this it? I think that summed it up for me.
All they do is shoot at us, drop their weapons, and then run. They take off their uniforms, and then they go back to their lives, so...
The tanks and the Amtraks and the other mechanized infantry were all circled around the large Tower of Saddam, standing, saluting in the center. And it was a very palpable, very high tension. You could feel the electricity just emanating off of this crowd.
We're just making some technical adjustments here, so bear with me.
We've seen the locals throwing shoes at the statue of Saddam Hussein in the centre of the square here, very much a sign.
People started throwing their sandals, their shoes, at the tower, which, of course, in the Middle East is a sign of great disrespect.
People surged around its base, smashing its marble plinth with sledgehammers.
And I knew then that we were right there at the cusp of a global historic event, that we were witnessing it and participating.
I think you can see that's an American Marine right at the top there, putting a flag and American stars and stripe over the face of the Iraqi strongman, the Iraqi dictator, whose statue is about to be toppled by the US Marines. And it's the...
Within short order, within 1 or 2 minutes, an Iraqi flag had been passed up. And that flag was then wrapped around the head of Saddam. And people were cheering and shouting and celebrating.
Then I think there was some sort of engineering battalion or something that came in along with the Marines, and they decided to give some help to the crowds.
The engineers on that tank, the tow tank, they drug a chain up, and they began anchoring that chain around the neck of the tower, his statue.
But at last, the symbol of dictatorship, Saddam Hussein himself, the most ubiquitous sight here. You see him everywhere. He stares out at you from street corners. He waves above you and every statue in every square. Well, here's one we're going to see fall.
As they began to pull this vehicle away, you could hear the snapping of the metal and the twisting and folding of the rebar that was holding that bronze statue up. And that whole tower just came right down.
Now the crowds will surge forward and try and trample him, take anything they can, kick him and attack him in any way they can. An extraordinary sight.
I understood this was a huge deal, that symbolic gesture of the tower falling represented much more than a statue falling. It was the end of a regime. It was a turning point in the timeline and the history of these people's lives and of their country.
All this feeling surging outwards, electrifying feeling of freedom after so many weeks of warfare and so many years and decades of repression.
There was no plan B in the Washington or UK plans for what they did after the fall of Saddam Hussein. At some stage it was thought that, maybe they'd never find him, but of course they did. They put him on trial and they hanged him.
Senior political sources are saying that justice has at last been done.
It was essentially a disaster for the people of Iraq and for Baghdad. It became a civil war.
It may have been a while, but the people of Baghdad know only too well when they're under siege.
It was sheer anarchy, and the 60% of the population are Shia. They owe their allegiance to Iran. That was bound to open up wounds that had never been healed.
And outside, in the real world, Iraq's worst day in a long, long time is unfolding.
There was no coherent system of Iraqi government that was able to take the strain in any way.
This was the foreign ministry after a huge truck bomb exploded.
What did the American victory actually achieve?
It came just minutes after a similar bombing outside the finance.
And it's still a source of instability, great suffering for the Iraqi population.
Imagine the impact of this in any other city. A coordinated series of attacks on this scale.
No, 19, I thought we were bringing the freedom and the democracy that as I envisioned it as a 19-year-old. And so it was a sense of pride. There was also a huge sense of accomplishment because I had my entire life dreamt of being part of the Marine Corps, an experience that very few people would ever be able to empathize with or understand. So it's something that I will always reflect on with positivity. But as I get older and have become more educated, I studied physics at the University of Texas and learned software programming. It's certainly a more subjective happiness and not objective.
It's just a few weeks since American forces withdrew from urban areas.
They are stressful memories. They will always be with me. But at the same time, the other things that you've covered as a journalist and as a war correspondent, they're still with me too. I could go on, but I mean, what hasn't changed is that politics is still using warfare. And that means, in a way, that as a journalist, we failed. We're not stopping it. No matter how awful the scenes are that we show the world, nothing is changing.
Iraqi sources estimate that the death toll as a result of the invasion of Iraq, subsequent insurgency and civil war has resulted in more than 200,000 deaths. In 2021, Iraq remains a country gripped by unrest. Taking Down Saddam was written and produced by Rob Mulhern, with recordings by Tom Gillespie. For more information, go to skynews.com/StoryCast21. Next time, a former RAF test pilot goes where no Briton has gone before.
My spacewalk was on the 15th of January in 2016. We actually spent the whole morning preparing for our spacewalk. For me, it was the view of Earth that motivated me.